It's that time. It's NAB time, and that means that Blackmagic came out with some huge announcement that may rock the filmmaking world to its very core. They updated cameras, they released new camera accessories, they dropped massive updates for Davinci Resolve, and most important, they released the Blackmagic Pyxis 12k Pro? Grant Petty basically activated God mode. He was putting every camera manufacturer on blast. He was spitting bars. He dropped a gem on him. It was banger after banger.
After banger! After banger!
And basically telling every other camera company, follow that. Or, to put it more succinctly, he walked in, hit a stunner, and walked back out.
Here comes the rattlesnake! The rattlesnake! Stunner in a bow! The rampage continues!
In fact, the only camera crime Grant Petty committed through his Blackmagic announcements was making us wait 2.5 hours before even talking about the Pyxis 12k. So, if you want the most important highlights for all the Blackmagic cameras, a breakdown of the new Pyxis camera, the specs, who it's for, whether it's worth upgrading, what extra features you get, and maybe a rather big problem that they built into this camera, then join me, Blackmagic's premier fuckboy, the ISAZH filmmaker, as I break it all down. First, the most shocking announcement regarding Blackmagic cameras at NAB had nothing to do with the new 12k Pyxis. Well, I mean it did, but we're now talking broadly about all of the newest generation of Blackmagic cameras. From the 12k Pyxis to the 6k Pyxis, the 6k Cine full frame to presumably the 12k LF and 17k Ursa Cine versions. All of them at some point will be getting autofocus through a camera firmware update. That's right, autofocus, one of the final frontiers for Blackmagic that we thought we may never see. And it's not just happening for new unreleased cameras, it's even happening on the Blackmagic 6K full frame, the Pyxis predecessor. And in fact, this camera I'm filming on, my camera will be the first to be getting this beta update. Remember when I said you might want to hold off on getting a Pyxis and sticking with the 6K full frame? Well, but seriously, this is something we never, or at least I never thought we'd see, least of all in a camera I've owned for well over a year. It used to be that some engineer at Blackmagic even mentioned autofocus. Grant Petty would come down from his office, hit a stunner on them, and walk away. It just seems like it was forbidden to even suggest. But here we are. The new autofocus system is pixel detect autofocus. It will be able to track objects, it will be able to track faces, and it will be able to do continuous autofocus. I recommend Team 2 Films' full breakdown of this update on their channel, which I'll leave a link to, but basically this is just going to be activated through a firmware update, which will be dropping any day now. At the moment, it's for the 6K full frame specifically, but presumably additional updates for the Pyxis cameras won't be too far away. Now, I primarily shoot manual lenses. I think vintage lenses with the Blackmagic cameras are an absolute unbeatable combo, and realistically, this autofocus is not going to start off being very good. I mean, maybe we'll see results similar to Panasonic's old autofocus system to begin with, but you know what's worse than having bad autofocus? Having no autofocus. This represents a huge leap for Blackmagic, a huge bonus for Blackmagic users, and something that could be incredibly helpful for filmmakers, particularly those using these cameras for more run and gun style work. And it will only get better from here. So this is a huge deal.
Sometimes they say huge.
They are also introducing a new pre-record feature, which means your camera can record up to 10 seconds before you hit record. This update is going to be for the Pyxis 6K and presumably 12K and above. Pre-record is another one of those handy features you don't appreciate until you need it. You've missed something that happened a second before you started recording, or a moment or two before you got your composition right. And again, this is a really helpful, innovative option to have. They also announced Davinci Resolve 20 is about to be released. Now, they spent over 45 minutes talking just about the new features of Davinci Resolve on this live stream. I took a nap, I woke up, and they were still talking about it. It is a monster update. There are a lot of AI tools that are really going to help shorten up workflow for editors. There's way too much to dig into here, but just some of the notable standouts will be the ability for Resolve to edit podcasts for you, cutting to the speaker and making that process automated. Now, if you've ever known the pain of cutting together a video podcast manually, you'll know that this would be a massive thing for time saving. They have also created this new vertical video layout. Vertical is not going away. Vertical is only going to become more dominant with more different types of projects being created for this medium, and this new layout in the Resolve panel just makes everything a lot easier to work on while editing. And Resolve is including a bunch of different vertical framing presets for you and new options to upload projects directly to social media, so you can go directly from the edit to your YouTube or TikTok without exporting it and then manually uploading it from your computer separately. They're thinking about the future. They're thinking about what will be helpful for content creators as well as sort of traditional filmmakers, and I really appreciate that. Aside from auto cutting podcasts, an evolution of this feature means that Resolve's AI theoretically can edit together scenes for you based off a script you feed into it. So it's like they can almost do an assembly edit for you before you even have to touch the edit suite. Now, we don't actually know how well this will work, but if it works, talk about a huge shortcut in your editing workflow. We all know about generative fill in Photoshop. Well, Resolve is also adding in their version for this for video. I can't tell you how valuable this is going to be for documentary filmmakers who sort of get stuck filming in bad locations. Now we can build out those locations using these generative AI tools. This could bypass the need to sort of hire a really expensive location space and just let AI do its thing. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't film in cool locations, but I am saying that this type of thing can really help if you don't have access to the best locations. Resolve will also come with a whole bunch of great audio features, AI tools that will clean up your audio and mix it automatically, AI tools that finally let you extend music tracks like you can in Adobe Premiere, automatic ducking tools to help you focus on specific audio tracks while minimizing the, say, background music tracks. And I'm just scratching the surface. So if you've ever thought about making the switch to Davinci Resolve from Adobe or Final Cut Pro, there has never been a better time, because these new features pretty much just straight up eviscerated what both Premiere and Final Cut Pro are doing. We're talking about on many levels above them. Resolve is the best suite for finishing films, from editing to mixing to audio to color grading and VFX. There is just nothing it now can't do. Blackmagic also announced that their new monitor will be compatible with the Blackmagic Micro G2, which is great news for people who like to use these smaller micro cinema cameras in a studio environment, or want a mini cube-based version of the original Blackmagic Pocket 4K with the ability to use a touchscreen monitor. It actually makes these tiny cameras a really viable option for a lot of different types of filming that is not just studio work. Then there was the slightly weirder new Pyxis broadcast television production handle with a built-in EVF, zoom handle, and a stereo mic on its front, and a camcorder style side handle adapter. These adapters will ship in June or July. Now, I like the idea of using the Pyxis in this broadcast style environment. I'm not actually sure this handle will really work that great from an ergonomic perspective. Like, will holding a Pyxis like this really be usable? And shouldn't they have built in a shotgun mic holder to fit it, and like a proper like sort of handle on the side? I mean, look, Blackmagic have great ideas, but it often takes them several attempts to really nail them in execution. And I have a feeling that this top handle priced at $875 might be one of those. And now we come to the mic drop moment where Grant Petty unveiled the new Blackmagic Pyxis 12K. Essentially, it's a Blackmagic Cine 12K LF inside the body of a Pyxis, but it does have a full 10G Ethernet connection and faster USB-C connection for SSD recording. So cosmetically from the outside, those are the only two body upgrades. Really, this is an upgrade to the Pyxis brain. This 12K sensor has 16 stops of dynamic range versus 13 stops of dynamic range on the original Pyxis. And if you were to truly ask, what is the difference between these cameras? Yes, there's frame rates, which we'll get to, but ultimately, it comes down to this extra dynamic range, this allegedly ARRI level dynamic range, this big boy cinema camera dynamic range, this Hollywood style dynamic range. Now, how much of that translates to you in your real world, real life projects is sort of up to you, but this is very much competing with any recent, far more expensive RED camera and probably looking to compete with the older ARRI cameras and Sony Venices. The Pyxis OG, while a fantastic image, is definitely not in the same space or conversation. So for me, this added dynamic range and this 12K sensor and presumably a much improved low light performance would be one of the key reasons to get the Pyxis 12K over the Pyxis 6K. The important thing to remember about this new Pyxis is that there's no crop in the sensor at 12K, 8K, and 4K. So nobody needs to or is forced to film in 12K. We don't need 12K, everyone agrees, but that's just the highest resolution at your disposal should you need it. But you get much more manageable resolutions without cropping or windowing into the sensor. This is what makes this sensor and Blackmagic's approach so unique and also so flexible. In fact, this option to film at 4K for everything should allow you to shoot with slightly smaller data rates than the Pyxis 6K. So you have a 12K camera, but you can film with it in 4K, leveraging the full sensor and still take up slightly less space on your memory cards than if you were recording with a Pyxis 6K or Cinema Camera 6K full frame. Think about that. Now, in terms of frame rates, if you shoot in 12K open gate, you get up to 40 frames per second, or 45 frames per second if it's 16:9 mode. If you shoot in 8K, you get 72 frames per second in open gate, and 84 frames per second in 16:9 mode. In 4K, you get the same frame rates as the 8K. Now, if you shoot in 17:9 mode, you get 50 frames per second at 12K, and 90 frames per second in 8K and 4K. If you film in the 2:1 aspect ratio, you can do 60 frames at 12K and 112 frames per second in 8K and 4K, which is very, very close to the magical 120 frames per second of cameras like the FX6 and FX3. Also remember that because you're filming from such a high resolution sensor to begin with, even though you're cropping in to get some of these higher frame rates slightly, your image quality is still going to be exceptionally high, like far higher quality than the 1.1 cropped 120 frames per second on the FX line of cameras. So basically, all frame rates in all modes on the 12K Pyxis are better than what you get from the 6K Pyxis OG. So if you're filming in higher frame rates and that's important to you, then the 12K seems like the much better choice. The new Pyxis 12K is $5,000 compared to $3,000 for the Pyxis OG. So if money is an issue, then you might have to settle for the Pyxis OG. For those of us that didn't upgrade or side grade from the 6K Cinema full frame to the original Pyxis, now seems like a much better time to upgrade and go for the Pyxis 12K. My biggest criticism of the original Pyxis was that you were essentially paying more for a cube with more ports but exactly the same image as the 6K Cine full frame, and I just can't justify buying the exact same camera in a different shape. Well, with the Pyxis 12K, that has all changed. You're getting a massively improved sensor in your Pyxis and the benefits of that cube. That seems like a much more worthy upgrade. I said wait for the Pyxis Pro. Well, the Pyxis Pro is here. The Pyxis 12K is shipping in June or July. So looking at these announcements, Blackmagic almost got everything right, but there's still one major issue with this camera which I think may be even more of a problem in the new 12K version, and that's these batteries. The Sony BPU batteries were never a great idea. It should have always been a proper V-mount solution. These stick out the back of your camera, they don't offer particularly long run times unless you get the really oversized versions, and they're just not a good professional choice for a professional cinema camera. Now, originally you could only get 1 hour of runtime out of a normal sized BPU battery with the original Pyxis. That has since been improved a bit through updates to about 1 hour 20, but 1 hour 20 is still not ideal. Now, if you consider that the new 12K sensor is going to require a lot more horsepower to run, then how long are these BPU batteries going to last? Remember, Blackmagic had to switch to B-mount batteries for the 12K LF Cine version of this camera because even V-mount voltage wasn't enough to power the highest frame rates in 12K. So now we're using these crappy BPU batteries that provide a fraction of the juice. How long will these realistically last? Why didn't Blackmagic just upgrade that backplate to a more sensible battery solution? Only real-world experience will tell how much of an issue this is going to be, but I definitely think that it could be a very serious flaw in the design. Of course, the other thing we were all hoping for is built-in ND filters. This didn't happen, but man, if you want to talk about a true unbreakable combo, adding that feature into this body would have made the prospect of upgrading an absolute no-brainer. As it stands, I'm still on the fence. This is a way better upgrade than the original Pyxis, but it's also way more expensive. There is that question mark around the battery life, and I'm not sure if this first version of the Pyxis 12K will be its final form. And would it have killed them to find a spot to add a second mini XLR? Finally, there's also something else I think we should mention here, and that's really important to think about. Do you need 16 stops of dynamic range and some extra frame rates? No, but do you though? Are you unhappy with the dynamic range on your older 6K full frame or Pyxis OG? When I was watching Florian's of To Lands promo footage of the 17K Ursa Cine, which I'll link to in the description, on the one hand it looked lovely, absolutely gorgeous. On the other hand, I thought it kind of looked exactly like Pyxis footage. Yes, I'm sure there's a difference away from YouTube compression, but how much of it do you really see? How much of it will your clients see or your audience see? I mean, that's the most important question. This 6K footage looked phenomenal. Does the 12K or 17K footage really represent something justifiably better? You know, we're all talking about it in this space, right? But cameras have sort of reached a point of stagnation where they all look great. All the images are great. Everything looks amazing. So to your eye, how much more amazing does the 17K image look when compared to a 6K one or a 4K one? Do you really see a difference having 3 more stops of dynamic range? Does any of it mean anything anymore? And in my opinion, if everything looks great, then it's the camera bodies, their ergonomics, their additional features, their engineering innovations, which are going to be what make the real difference to filmmakers going forward. And in that regard, the Pyxis 12K is pretty much exactly the same as the Pyxis 6K. It doesn't actually have those body upgrades I was hoping for in V-mount batteries and built-in NDs. So personally, in my humble Blackmagic fuckboy opinion, the juice isn't necessarily worth the squeeze until the body designs get the same type of innovation these camera sensors do. Now, there is no doubt as disruptors of Blackmagic are absolutely schooling the competition, and this might be one of their most exciting NAB updates yet. I mean, former Red Camera CEO Jared Land must just be sipping a Mai Tai somewhere on a tropical island thinking he cashed out at exactly the right time, because Blackmagic is most definitely coming for Red's market share, and this camera will put a huge amount of pressure on Nikon to respond. Ultimately, the winners here are going to be us, the filmmakers, and I'm looking forward to testing Blackmagic's autofocus and this new Pyxis 12k and using new features of Davinci Resolve, but maybe not pulling the trigger on actually upgrading from my Blackmagic cinema camera 6K full frame just yet, because it does still have an amazing image. I'm very happy with it. It's the quality of life improvements from the body design that I'm more interested and excited about. Now, if you want to see coverage of some of the other Blackmagic cameras I have used or tested and footage from them, then click on the links beside me. As always, I am the Savage Filmmaker, and I'll see you when I see you.